Hi, Adam here at Twinkl, and I'm with teacher and author Helen Haraldsen, and we're going to be talking about the joys and trials of teaching English and literacy. Hi, Helen.
Hi, you okay?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. I've got tea, I've got chocolate. What's not to love? How are you doing?
I'm good. I've just been watching Wimbledon, so I'm breaking off from that to come and do this.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very honored that I'm ranking above Wimbledon.
You are.
So I'll try and not keep you from your tennis. I will dive right in. So as a teacher, librarian and author, what's been your experience with teaching literacy and encouraging readers to pick up their books?
It's been the full range, really. So I started off as a primary school teacher. That's what I did, first, straight out of university. And my kind of main experience there was, reading with children, reading to children, having a class novel. I loved that experience because there were times when I would be reading the book to my class and they were loving it so much, we would not notice that it was playtime. And other people had gone outside and would have to say, oh, look, everyone, we better stop. It's playtime. And they would say, no, keep going, get to the end of the chapter. And same at home time. If we were reading it at the end of the day, we'd have to kind of chase them out of the door because they were so enjoying that story that they didn't want it to end. So, sometimes kids who I've taught who weren't maybe that keen on reading, when they've had a brilliant book read to them with out loud, with enthusiasm, that can really show reluctant readers how amazing stories can be. And I think that's why sharing stories with children is so important. From there, I became a secondary school librarian and English teacher. And while I've been supporting children with reading, we have accelerated reader in my school, so we have lessons for that. I often find that reading with children and taking turns, because a lot of children don't like reading out loud. You wanting to support their reading, but they don't feel confident reading out loud. So if I take a turn, we kind of switch back and forth, feel a bit more comfortable, and helps them to be more engaged. And then, talking to them about the story, that can help as well. As a secondary school teacher, I've had lots of kids tell me that they don't read and they don't like books. It's almost like a challenge. I do not like books. Off you go. And then we've started a class novel, and we've got into it, and then they've, against their will almost, they've become curious and shocked and outraged about things that happen in these fictional stories. And they go from, I'm not a reader, suddenly they're coming bouncing into the classroom saying, are we reading today? And then when you say yes, it's like, yes. And then you finish it and they ask, what are we reading next? What are we reading the next book in the series? And it's kind of like, you've quietly turned them into readers. And at that point, I will often show them books that I've read. It's always books that I've read that are similar in some way to the book that we've just been reading, to try and kind of, bounce them from one onto the next. And then as a librarian, I've seen kids who are in year 10 and 11 who won't go past Horrid Henry or Wimpy Kid. And then I've got kids in year 7 who are reading Charles Dickens. So, there's a huge range there of what's going on with kids and their reading. And I used to take part in the Kids Lit reading quiz for many years. And in its last year, we won the national final in London. And we would have gone to the world final in New Zealand had it not been for COVID. And those kids, when they came back to school, having won that, and the school knew that they were going to go and represent their country and go to New Zealand because they read books, they became kind of like pop stars, superstars. It's like, what, they just read books and they're getting to do that. So it really, that was a great thing in helping to encourage readers in our school.
To go back to something you mentioned earlier about, a kid coming in and going, I don't like books. Let's go.
Yeah. What are you going to do about it?
Exactly. As someone who might have heard the phrase, why do I need English? I already know it, a couple of times. What has been your experience with talking with pupils who dislike reading and writing?
Generally, I think it is that they find it difficult, or that they lack confidence, or sometimes they don't see the point of what they're doing. So I think the top 2 questions I get asked are, why do I need to know Shakespeare? And when am I ever going to analyse a poem in my life? They're the kinds of things that often come up, especially with the GCSE year groups. So I always tell them that English is about communication and understanding the effect and the power of words. So reading books, Shakespeare, poems, whatever it is, they all allow us to reach outside of our own experience and, and see the world beyond our doorstep. And that's part of why we study English and why we need it. I think through some of the things that we read, it helps us to understand ourselves better, but also others. And sometimes I've had children, when we've been reading a poem, sometimes they've stayed back at the end of the lesson, and it's just they want to share something with you, and you can see that poem's hit a nerve in a way. It's connected with them, or it's made them think about something differently. And that's an important thing. It opens minds and helps us to decide what our opinions are, I think. And I also like to tell children how language is powerful, and it can be used negatively as well. Language can be used in the media and in all sorts of things to confuse and manipulate. And by being confident with words and meaning, and by having those close analysis skills that we teach, that you're probably never going to do outside unless you're going to be an English teacher, but learning to analyse means you're much better able to recognise the writer behind the words and what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve, which is something that is helpful to have. And when kids say, why do I need English? Another thing that I like to say is that good writers often get what they want. Because when you're able to express yourself in writing, it means you can often express yourself verbally better as well. And if you're able to do that and you are articulate and you can put an opinion across and you can support what you think, then that opens lots of doors.
We all probably have an idea in education on how to answer this, but how important is reading and writing in everyday life?
Yeah, so reading and writing isn't just about passing exams, although you need it to be able to pass exams, but it's an absolute life skill. Whether you're at school or you're an adult, text is all around us every day. We're bombarded with text. So being able to understand the messages and what the purpose of those are is very important. And I think whether you're a person who reads for pleasure or not, you still need to be able to read to engage with all of that and all the fun stuff that you get to read as an adult, like work contracts and letters about your mortgage and your house insurance, because they can be baffling. And very frightening, I think, if you're not able to, deduce what they're actually saying, because there's usually lots of words to not say very much. Some things seem to be deliberately confusing. So it gives you confidence, I think, if you can strip it back and think, right. And then there's real life writing as well. So, I always say to children, because I'm in the secondary school, so we're often talking about employment now, and they're obsessed with exam grades. And I always say to them, yeah, but it's the covering letter that will get you the interview or not, because there'll be lots of people who've got similar grades to you. How are you going to stand out? They haven't met you yet. It'll be you and your personality that will get you the job. But to get the interview, you need to write a good covering letter. But I think it's much more than that. I think young people who struggle with reading and writing struggle in school with everything every day. And you can just see how they get so frustrated. It affects their self-esteem. Then they fall behind. Then everything gets harder. Then they get more frustrated. That can lead them to feeling angry. That can get them into trouble, and it just becomes a negative spiral. So I think being literacy fit is as good for you as being physically fit, because it's good for your mental health. It's brilliant for confidence, your sense of self-worth. And happiness.
My next question, what do you do to make English more exciting?
Two things really that I try to do. The first one is to help kids see themselves as writers. Lots of kids will tell me that they can't write stories, and I think that's because they think they have to create brand new, weird and wonderful worlds and characters, and it has to be, brand new. They have to have come up with it exactly from that. And that they feel pressure because they may have just read a book in class or by their favourite author and they can't write like that. And I always tell them, no, nobody can. Nobody can write like anybody. All these writers, nobody can write like them, because all writers are individual, because it all comes from your life experience, your personality, your interests, your passions, the things that you've seen and heard. So you can't copy, you can't emulate anybody else. You just have to be yourself. And I also tell kids that we're all walking, talking stories ourselves. We are all kind of, you know, incomplete stories. We're works in progress. There are chapters on the move. And we've all had some events in our life that you might call a plot twist, because lives are full of ups and downs, and, you know, you can use them. So I share when I talk to my own classes, or when I go in to do author visits, I talk to kids about how much of my book, or the books that I write, is real. It's from my real life experience. It's from what's going on in the world. You know, the news is a brilliant source of stories, because there's always things going on that are there that you can put in. And then there's a little bit of fictional pepper, you know, put on top for flavoring. But lots of it is really going on. And I talk to kids about how stories are like dots. Everything that you experience, everything that you see and hear, everything that you read, everything that you watch, they're all dots, and that, you know, you can join them together to create something new. You don't have to come up with something brand new. I think there's a saying, isn't it? There's only about 7 original story ideas, and everything else is an amalgamation of them. And I've heard from teachers after I've been into schools and talked about my books and how I've written them and how I've come up with the ideas, you know, and they've said that the children who said they couldn't write and identified as being non-writers have kind of been released from that, what they've thought, when they've heard that they can use their own story and their own interests and real life and real life history, things that have actually happened. You know, they can borrow all these different elements to create their own stories. So I think that's kind of important. I like to do that. I have an author branding workshop that I do for schools, which helps kids to see themselves as writers and who they are as a writer in their own right, without comparing themselves. And I love it when you get a child who has been one of those, I can't write, and then they find something that they love to write about, and then all these words just pour out onto the page, and you can see them like looking surprised and amazed. Like, what's happened here? And it's just that something's been unlocked. So that's one thing, I think, helping kids to see that they're all writers, just to go for it. And then the second thing is collaboration. English is one of those subjects because it's often, you know, you're trying to pass an exam at the end of it and you're working on your own skills. It's all done very individually. But I like to get kids working together in teams. So in my school, I have a writers and illustrators club, and we've done a couple of collaborative projects, 2 where we've written a novel together. So we've had children from year 7 up to year 13 working together, and they've planned it, written it, edited it, illustrated it, written the blurb. We've got a professional cover designer to design a cover, and then we've published it, and it's out in the world. And those kids have got their name in a book before they've even left school. So the sense of accomplishment that they have, and that they get to see that person's good at ideas, that person's a fast writer, that person's good at spelling, that person's good at editing at the end because they know where the speech marks go and they know where the commas need to be. You know, they get to see how it is a team effort. And I think that's really important. We did another project where there was a local camper van business. He had all these different camper vans, they were different colours, and he'd invented a personality for them. So this is the one that likes to go to the beach. This is the one that likes to do festivals. This is the one that likes to do weddings. And they asked us if we would write some little short stories to go with the vans. So again, the kids worked in teams, and they had a real purpose to these books. You know, they were going to go out and be part of this business. So they were writing for a real purpose. And the excitement that brings when they see their work, it's not just in an exercise book, it's going to get a tick or something. Like it has a real purpose. That's another thing that I love to do.
What would you say to someone who finds studying English a challenge?
I would say don't be hard on yourself, because English is a challenging subject. There are so many different parts to it. And even people who might say that they're good at English might not be good at all parts of it. I think I would say to people about writing, it's important to know that all writers generally struggle to write a first draft. When you see something that's written, you read a published book, I always use the analogy that that is like a person who's, ready to go to the Oscars. A book that's in its first draft has just fallen out of bed. It hasn't cleaned its teeth. It hasn't brushed its hair. It hasn't got any clothes on yet. It's just slobbing around with a dressing gown whereas the published book has been to the hairdressers. It's had its makeup on. It's had its nails done. It's got perfume on. It's got a new outfit. And that's what you're trying to balance against when you're writing. Even writers, I hate writing a first draft because I look at it and think, oh, I want to give up. It's awful. You have to keep going. So, I say to kids, when you look at something and you think it's no good, it isn't any good probably because it's your first attempt. So, be prepared to do the editing. I always say to people, you're not bad at English if you can't get it right the first time, because most people don't. Solo writing is rare in the world of writing. The people who write, they don't do it on their own. Even writers who write books by themselves, there's a lengthy editing process. I mean, Roald Dahl is celebrated for his wonderful books, but he had a lot of input from his editor. So any writer will say it's a team effort. So again, for people who struggle with the subject, you're not expected to be able to do it on your own. That's what teachers are for. Other people in your class, ask them to have a look and see what they think. But ask. English is definitely a subject that you can get better at by practicing. And no writing is ever a waste of time, because bad writing leads to slightly better writing, and that leads to better writing. It's a bit like running a marathon. You can't just get up one day and think I'm going to go and run 27 miles and it'll be great. You have to sort of start slowly and train and build up to it. And it's the same with writing skills, English skills. It is difficult, it is challenging, but the more you do it, you find your voice, you find your way of writing. And yeah, the more you do, the easier and the better it gets. And then I would also just revisit what I said before. If people think that they're not good at it because they can't think of what to write or whatever, ideas are all around. Just look at your own life, look at your next door neighbour, your friends, your family, the things that are happening to them. Watch the news or news round, or read newspapers, magazines, watch documentaries, dramas, films. They're all stories. We are living in we're just bombarded by stories. You don't have to come up with things that are from scratch yourself. You just borrow, and that's the way to, I think, go about writing. Just have your eyes and ears open. I like to tell kids you won't have much of a life if you don't get off your phone. Because you've got to actually look up and look around you and listen and experience things. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be going on fabulous holidays and doing all these exciting things, but you need to get out of the door. You need to go outside and see what's going on. And that's usually my advice when I go on author visits and kids ask for advice for writers. That's generally what I say.